The boardroom was too quiet for a Monday morning. That kind of quiet where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. The kind you only get when people with too much power and too little understanding are about to make a decision that will cost everyone else their jobs. I was seated at the far end of the glass table, my laptop open, system dashboards frozen mid-refresh, green indicators, stable latency. The platform had processed 2.3 million transactions overnight without a blip. But stability is invisible to people who mistake noise for progress. Across from me stood Evan Clark, 26 years old, brand new, head of innovation, and the CEO's only son. He leaned casually against the presentation screen, arms crossed, smiling like this was all a game he'd already won. "This code is garbage," Evan said, laughing. The words echoed louder than they should have. A few people shifted in their seats. Nobody spoke. They never did when Evan was around. He clicked his remote, flipping through slides I hadn't created, summarizing systems he'd never built. The red laser pointer flicked erratically across my architecture diagram like a child shaking a glow stick. "This whole thing is over-engineered," he continued. "Too complex, too slow. Atlas wants lean, modern, not this." He turned to look at me for the first time. "Really look." "Mila, right?" he said, squinting. "You've been here, 6 years?" "7, actually," but I didn't correct him. "Yes," I said calmly. He nodded as if confirming a private suspicion. "Figures, legacy thinking." The word legacy landed like an accusation. That code, the code he was mocking, powered the settlement engine behind every financial transaction our company processed. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't trendy. It was precise, deterministic, boring in the way air traffic control is boring, which is to say, essential. "This garbage," I said evenly, "is the reconciliation layer that keeps our exposure under regulatory thresholds. You remove it, the system doesn't just slow down, it violates compliance." Evan laughed again. "See? That's the problem," he said, glancing at his father at the head of the table. "She talks like a risk memo." The CEO, Richard Clark, didn't look at me. He was focused on his son, proud in the way only powerful men get when they see themselves reflected back. "Atlas wants innovation," Evan said. "They don't want excuses." I felt something tighten in my chest. Atlas Capital wasn't just a partner. They were the partner. A $420 million acquisition contingent on one thing, system robustness, which was why they'd been talking to me privately for weeks. I kept my hands folded on the table. "Evan," I said carefully, "this architecture was personally reviewed by Atlas's engineering due diligence team." "And they hated it," Evan snapped, tapping his tablet. That was a lie. A clean one. The dangerous kind. Before I could respond, he walked toward the server console mounted into the wall. My stomach dropped. "Let's clean this up," he said. "Don't," I said. The room went colder. He paused, turned, amused. "Excuse me?" "You don't have staging access," I said. "And production auto-syncs during business hours. If you touch—" "I have admin," he cut in. "As of Friday." Of course he did. Richard still didn't look at me. Evan smiled wider. "Watch and learn." He typed quickly. Too quickly. He didn't read anything, just selected directories like he was tidying a desktop. My directories. "Mila, this isn't personal," he said, almost kindly. "We're just trimming fat." Click. Disable. The dashboard blinked. Yellow, red. Someone inhaled sharply behind me. "What did you just shut down?" I asked. "The core engine," he said proudly. Bloated, inefficient, dead weight. He hit confirm. The system froze for half a second, just long enough for me to understand exactly what would happen next. My phone vibrated on the table. I didn't look at it yet. Evan turned, brushing his hands together. "And that's how you modernize." He glanced at his father. "Honestly, she's been holding us back." Richard finally spoke. "Mila," he said, voice tight, "this isn't working anymore." I met his eyes. "You're fired." Silence. No one defended me, not my team, not the CFO who knew exactly what had just been deleted. Fear is efficient that way. I want her access revoked immediately, Evan added, before she breaks anything else. Irony is quiet when it does its best work. I exhaled slowly and reached for my phone. Evan noticed and smirked. No calls, he said. Security's on the way. I'm not calling a lawyer, I said. I answered the phone. Hello, I said calmly. Mila speaking. The voice on the other end was steady, professional. Mila, the man said, this is Atlas Capital. We were hoping you'd come to a decision today. Evan's smile faltered. Yes, I said, standing up. I have. Every eye in the room snapped to me. I'm happy to accept Atlas's offer, I said, without looking away from Evan. Behind me, the main system monitor flashed red again, then went dark. And somewhere deep in the building, alarms began to sound. The first alarm was soft, almost polite. A single chime from the status panel near the glass wall, the kind of notification you get for a minor service degradation, something an intern fixes with a reboot and a coffee. No one reacted. Then the second alert hit. Louder, sharper. Red bands began crawling across the monitoring screens mounted along the boardroom wall. Latency spikes, authentication retries, failed handshakes multiplying in neat, terrifying rows. Evan frowned. That's normal, he said, uncertainty slipping into his voice. It's just reindexing. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. The room had shifted. You could feel it, like a pressure change before a storm. Richard finally turned toward the screens. The color drained from his face. What am I looking at? He asked. The head of operations spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. Transaction failures. How many? Richard snapped. Another engineer glanced at his laptop, hands shaking. All of them. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was hollow. Evan laughed again, too fast, too loud. Relax, it's probably a dependency conflict. We'll roll back. You can't roll back, I said. Both of them turned on me. Evan's eyes narrowed. I thought I fired you. You did, I said calmly, which means my access is already revoked. Richard stiffened. Evan? He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. I told it to lock her profile. Locks don't undo deletions. A junior analyst suddenly stood up. Sir, she said to Richard, the clearing queues are backing up. If this keeps going, counterparties will start failing reconciliation. Richard's voice rose. Fix it. I can't, she said, near tears. The engine coordinating the matching logic is offline. Evan's confidence cracked. That doesn't make sense. We didn't shut that down. I folded my arms. You deleted it. No, I deleted redundant code. That redundant code, I said evenly, was the reconciliation kernel. Without it, the system can't validate trades, which means Atlas's risk model just lit up like a Christmas tree. At the mention of Atlas, Richard's head snapped toward me. What offer? He demanded. Before I could answer, his own phone rang. He grabbed it, stepping away from the table. The room fell into a low murmur. Whispered panic, frantic typing, chairs scraping back as people rushed to screens. Evan stood frozen, staring at the boards. Richard's voice rose across the room. Yes, this is Richard Clark. No, I'm not aware of any... He stopped, listened. His face went pale, then red. What do you mean you're suspending due diligence? He shouted. This is a temporary outage. We're optimizing... A pause. His shoulders slumped. Yes. Yes, I understand. He ended the call slowly. The room was watching him now. The Atlas deal, Richard said hoarsely, is off. A collective breath escaped the room. Someone swore under their breath. Evan's face lit up. Actually lit up. Like he'd just proven something. See? He said quickly. They were already looking for an excuse. We'll find another buyer. I expected Richard to explode. Instead, he went very still. Atlas said, Richard continued, voice dangerously calm, that their decision was triggered by a direct conversation with their engineering team. His eyes shifted. They landed on me. They said their confidence was based on a single person's system design, he said. A person they'd been consulting independently. The air thickened. Evan scoffed. That's ridiculous. Who? Richard's phone buzzed again. He answered on speaker without meaning to. Richard, the Atlas representative said, clipped and professional. We need to clarify something urgently. Richard swallowed. Go ahead. Who is your lead systems engineer? The architect responsible for your transaction core? Evan answered first. That would be me. There was a pause, a small one, but deadly. No, the voice said. That's not the name we have. Richard's fingers trembled. Then who? He asked. Another pause. Mila Kovac, the representative said. She designed the reconciliation engine we validated. She's also the person who accepted our offer 5 minutes ago. The boardroom froze. Evan laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That's impossible. Richard slowly turned toward his son. You said the code was garbage, Richard whispered. Evan opened his mouth, closed it. On the screens behind them, error counts ticked higher. Failed settlements, canceled transactions, emails pouring in from partners who didn't understand why their money had stopped moving. Richard's voice cracked. You fired her. She was in the way, Evan said weakly. You told me to streamline. Richard staggered back into his chair. A director leaned toward him. If Atlas walked, others will hear. We're exposed. Richard buried his face in his hands. Evan looked around, suddenly unsure. Dad, say something. Richard looked up. Who did you just delete? He asked. I didn't wait for security. There was no dramatic walkout, no shouting match, no final speech. I simply unplugged my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up while the room was still trapped in shock. No one tried to stop me. That silence followed me as I walked out of the boardroom. The kind of silence that only exists when people are afraid to speak because they might finally hear the truth. The hallway lights buzzed softly. Somewhere behind me, raised voices were beginning to overlap. Legal, compliance, operations. The vocabulary of panic had entered the room. I didn't turn around. At my desk, I moved quickly but calmly. Years of production incidents had trained my body to stay steady while everything else burned. I packed only what mattered. My laptop cable, my notebook, the framed photo of my mother that had survived 3 offices and 1 merger. I left the company laptop. Let them keep it. Without the system, it was just expensive plastic. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stepped into an empty conference room and answered. Mila Kovac, I said. Mila, this is Daniel Rowe from Atlas Capital, the voice said. We're glad you accepted. I wish the circumstances were cleaner. They rarely are, I replied. There was a pause. Are you safe to talk? Yes, I've left the building. Good, he said, because I need to be very clear about what's happening on our end. I sat down. Your former company is actively failing its operational obligations, Daniel continued. We're monitoring cascading transaction reversals across 3 clearing partners. That doesn't happen unless the core reconciliation logic is compromised. It was deleted, I said simply. Not sabotaged. Deleted. Another pause. Then a sigh. That aligns with what we're seeing, Daniel said, which is why we moved quickly. Moved how? I asked. We invoked the material adverse change clause, he said. The $420 million acquisition is terminated effective immediately. I closed my eyes, not because I was surprised, because I knew what would follow. I assume your CEO isn't taking that well? Daniel added. No, I said. He isn't. We'll handle the legal messaging, Daniel said, but there's something else. I waited. Mila, he said carefully, we need you onboarded today. Today? We're standing up a clean environment as we speak, he said. Separate infrastructure, fresh repositories, no shared IP. We won't touch anything that could even resemble their codebase. I smiled faintly. You've thought this through. We had to, he said, because we weren't buying a company. A pause. We were buying certainty. I ended the call 15 minutes later with a calendar invite and a building address. South Lake Union, 40 minutes away. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone lit up again. Slack notifications, cascading like dominoes. They hadn't revoked my access yet. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. As Ops War Room was chaos. Payments frozen across EU cluster. Clearing partner asking for ETA. Who turned off auto settlement? Rollback failing. Missing binaries. A private message popped up. Nina, compliance. Mila, are you okay? Do you know what's happening? I typed back one sentence. I told them not to touch it. I deleted Slack. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped into the lobby. The security guard glanced up, confused. Badge? He asked. I'm done, I said gently. He nodded. He didn't stop me. Outside, the air smelled like rain and traffic. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking now. Not from fear, but from the delayed adrenaline release my body had been holding back for hours. My phone rang again. This time it was Richard. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Then a text. Mila, please call me. There's been a misunderstanding. I laughed quietly. By the time I reached my car, financial news alerts were already lighting up my screen. Atlas Capital withdraws from Clark Systems acquisition. Shares halted amid operational outage. This hadn't even made it to noon yet. As I pulled out of the garage, my phone buzzed once more. A new message. This one from Evan. You went behind our backs. You sabotaged us. I didn't reply. I merged onto the highway, the city skyline sliding past my window. Somewhere inside that building, people were scrambling to rebuild something they'd never bothered to understand. They would try quick fixes, emergency patches, consultants, meetings. But systems don't forgive ignorance. They only reveal it. My phone chimed one last time as I crossed the bridge. Daniel, Atlas. Welcome aboard, Mila. Conference room 40B. Everyone's waiting. I turned up the radio and drove toward my future, while my past collapsed quietly behind me. Atlas didn't look like a company preparing to catch a falling knife. No rushing. No shouting. No glass-walled panic rooms. The lobby was quiet in a way that instantly told you everything you needed to know. Calm only exists where people trust their systems. I checked in, was given a temporary badge, and escorted to the 41st floor. No paperwork yet. No HR slideshow. Just a short walk down a hallway lined with whiteboards filled with equations, diagrams, and half-erased ideas. Daniel Rowe was waiting for me outside conference room B. He stood when he saw me, offering his hand. Mila, I'm glad you made it. So am I said honestly. Inside the room were 8 people. Engineers, architects, legal. Not a single one of them was pretending to multitask. They were all present. This is Mila Kovacs, Daniel said. She designed the transaction engine we based our valuation on. No applause, no theatrics, just nods, recognition, respect. We're going to move fast, Daniel continued, but clean. Mila, the floor is yours. I took a breath and stepped forward. The engine Clark Systems ran was built to solve one problem, I said. Absolute transactional integrity under unpredictable load. The mistake they made wasn't deleting code. I paused. It was not understanding what depended on it. A few heads nodded. We are not rebuilding their system, Daniel said carefully. We are building ours. Good, I said. Then we do it right. I outlined the architecture. Stateless services, deterministic reconciliation, immutable logs, no shortcuts, no demos glued together with hope. We can have a working core in 2 weeks, I said. Production ready in 6. Silence. Then one of the senior engineers spoke. That aggressive? Yes, I said. Because we're not guessing. Daniel watched faces around the room, then smiled. Let's begin. An hour later, I was logged into a brand new environment. New credentials, new repositories. My name already printed on the access badge, Lead Systems Architect. No suffix. No qualifiers. Just truth. While Atlas moved forward with precision, my phone, muted but visible, kept lighting up. I wasn't blocked at Clark Systems yet. Someone had forgotten a switch, or was too busy putting out fires to remember. I didn't open Slack. I opened a message from Nina. Legal is spiraling. We're getting inquiries from regulators. Richard keeps asking where you are. Another message followed. Nina. Evan tried to re-enable the service by restoring partial modules. It's worse now. I closed my eyes. Partial restores are a special kind of disaster, enough to break everything twice. Daniel glanced at my screen. Bad? Predictable? I said. He nodded. Do you need distance from this? No, I said. I need clarity. By mid-afternoon, news sites were running deeper analysis. Sources report internal engineering failures contributed to Atlas withdrawal. Regulators request clarification on halted settlements. I watched one article refresh. The language changing in real time, the story sharpening its teeth. This is when they start looking for villains. One of Atlas's lawyers said quietly. Daniel glanced at me. You ready for that? I met his gaze. I keep logs. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang again. Richard, I stepped into a side office and answered. Mila, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. His voice sounded smaller. We need to talk. There's nothing to clarify, I said. There is, he insisted. Evan didn't understand. Then you shouldn't have put him in charge, I interrupted gently. This wasn't personal, Richard. It was structural. Silence. We can fix this, he said finally. Come back. I'll undo the termination. Whatever Atlas offered, I'll match it. You can't, I said. Try me. You already chose transformation theater over engineering reality, I replied. This isn't about money anymore. His breath hitched. You're letting the company burn. No, I said softly. I warned you about the fire exits. He hung up. An hour later, Evan tried. You did this to prove a point. This could have been handled internally. I didn't respond, because while he typed, Atlas's prototype environment spun up seamlessly. Live traffic simulations, clean flow, no alarms. Daniel stood behind me, watching throughput metrics stabilize. Feels familiar? He asked. Like breathing again, I replied. At 6:03 p.m., my Slack at Clark Systems finally disconnected. You've been removed from the workspace. It took them a full working day. Daniel leaned in the doorway. We just got confirmation, he said. Atlas's board released an internal memo. I looked up. They said the deal didn't fall apart. He continued. It was misrepresented. I smiled weakly. They're calling it a governance failure. Daniel's tone sharpened, which is executive code for someone's head is about to roll. I shut down my screen and leaned back in my chair for the first time that day. Outside the window, the city lights blinked on one by one. 2 companies, same city, same hour, one quietly building, the other finally discovering what happens when you delete the wrong thing. By Wednesday morning, the outage had a name. Not internally, those names are always euphemisms designed to soften the blow. But in the press, they were calling it the Clark Freeze. Every article reused the same photo of the headquarters. Glass facade, logo gleaming, sunlight reflecting confidence that no longer existed inside. From Atlas's 41st floor, I could see the building across the water. Same city, different fate. Daniel handed me a coffee and nodded at my screen. You're trending. I'd prefer throughput metrics, I replied. They're solid, he said. This is the other fire. The first subpoena arrived just after noon. Not to me, to Clark Systems. But the request mentioned my name 3 times. Former lead engineer, primary system architect, key witness. I stared at the PDF longer than I should have. They're going to claim sabotage, I said. Daniel didn't flinch. They always do. By mid-afternoon, Nina called. Not messaged. Called. I don't have much time, she whispered. Legal's in the room. I closed my office door. Talk. Richard's in trouble, she said. Real trouble. Regulators pulled transaction logs. The deletion timestamp lines up exactly with Evan's admin credentials. I exhaled slowly. And Evan? There was a beat. He's not in the building anymore. I pictured his grin from Monday morning, the laser pointer, the delete switch. Did he resign? I asked. She almost laughed. No, Richard escorted him out. Silence stretched between us. They're saying he acted without authorization, Nina continued, that he misunderstood the system. Did he? I asked. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. That evening, Daniel sat in on my architecture review. We finalized the transaction validation flow, clean, modular, resilient. When we stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. There's something else, he said. Richard wants to meet. I didn't respond immediately. He's asked Atlas to broker a conversation, Daniel added. Off record. No lawyers. I turned toward the window. No, I said. Daniel nodded. I thought you might say that. On Thursday, the analyst downgrades began. One by one, like dominoes. Unable to assess operational risk. Governance concerns remain unresolved. Leadership instability. Every sentence was a scalpel. Late that night, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I shouldn't have answered. But I did. Mila, Richard said. His voice sounded aged, worn thin. I know you don't want to hear from me. Then why are you calling? I asked. I need to understand, he said. Not for the company, for myself. I leaned back in my chair. You built something extraordinary, he continued. Why didn't you just explain it to Evan in simpler terms? I closed my eyes. I did, I said. For years. Silence. He didn't want to learn, I added. He wanted to perform authority, and you wanted him to succeed more than you wanted the truth. His breath caught. I thought innovation meant disruption, he said quietly. No, I answered. Innovation means responsibility. He didn't speak after that. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not with anger, but with finality. That chapter of my life was closing whether I watched it or not. Friday arrived with rain. Seattle rain, light, persistent, non-negotiable. At Atlas, we ran our first end-to-end simulation with live market data. No hiccups, no spikes. Daniel watched the metrics roll. This would have impressed them, he said. It did, I replied. They just didn't know why. Across town, Clark Systems hosted an emergency all-hands. I wasn't there, but Nina texted me afterward. Richard announced Evan's departure, effective immediately. He said mistakes were made at the leadership level. I stared at the message for a long time. Leadership level. Singular. That afternoon, I finally received the email I'd been expecting. A formal notice. Intent to depose. Date. Monday. Location. Neutral site. Scope. System failure. Data integrity. Deletion events. Daniel read it over my shoulder. You okay? Yes, I said. And I meant it. Because truth is heavier than lies, but it doesn't collapse under its own weight. As I packed up for the weekend, another alert flashed. Clark Systems announces indefinite suspension of operations. No euphemisms left. Just reality. I shut down my monitor and stood in the quiet office. I hadn't destroyed them. They'd done that themselves. By mistaking confidence for competence, authority for understanding. All I'd done was stop holding the structure upright while they kicked at its foundation. Monday would come. And with it, the last illusion they had left. The deposition room didn't look like justice. It looked like a conference room that had lost its purpose. Gray carpet, artificial lighting, a long table scarred with scratches from anxious hands. No windows, no drama. Just facts waiting to be dragged into the light. I arrived 10 minutes early. Daniel sat beside me, silent, reviewing a thin folder. Across the room, two Atlas lawyers whispered to each other. Calm, prepared, not worried. That told me everything I needed to know. Richard arrived last. He looked thinner than I remembered. His suit hung slightly loose, as if it belonged to a man with more certainty. He avoided my eyes at first. When he finally glanced up, something in his expression twisted. Regret, maybe. Or the realization that this room existed because of choices he could no longer undo. Evan did not appear. His attorney did. That absence spoke louder than any testimony could. The court reporter adjusted her machine. Someone cleared their throat. "Let's begin," the opposing counsel said. They started gently. Background questions, employment dates, my role at Clark Systems. "I was the systems architect," I said, "responsible for the design, maintenance, and operational integrity of the transaction engine." "And that engine," the lawyer asked, "was critical to the Atlas acquisition?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was the only component that ensured settlement accuracy under scale," I replied. "Everything else was presentation." Richard shifted in his seat. Then they moved to Monday. "Walk us through the event timeline," the lawyer said. I did not editorialize. I listed times, actions, system responses. At 10:42 a.m., Evan accessed the production console. At 10:44, he disabled the reconciliation kernel. At 10:45, transaction failures began. At 10:47, automated safeguards halted the pipeline. "Did you authorize this action?" the lawyer asked. "No." "Were you informed in advance?" "No." They slid a document across the table. "Please review Exhibit C." I recognized it instantly. Git logs, clean, time-stamped, immutable. Red lines trace deletions. Evan's credentials. Evan's IP address. The lawyer turned to Richard. "Mr. Clark," he said evenly, "were you aware your son had admin privileges over production systems?" Richard swallowed. "Yes." "Did he have formal training in the architecture?" "No." "Did you override internal recommendations to restrict his access?" Richard hesitated. The silence stretched. "Yes," he said. I didn't look at him. Evan's attorney cleared his throat. "Objection. My client acted under executive directive." "Executive directive to do what?" Atlas's counsel countered. "Delete systems he did not understand?" The objection was noted. Overruled. Then came the pivot. The move everyone had been waiting for. The sabotage claim. "Ms. Kovacs," Evan's attorney said, "isn't it true you designed the system in such a way that disabling one component would cause a full operational failure?" I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. A ripple ran through the room. "Isn't that reckless?" he pressed. "No," I replied calmly. "It's called a fail-safe." I leaned forward. "If a financial system continues operating after losing its reconciliation layer," I continued, "it commits fraud." Silence. "So you admit," he tried, "that the system was fragile?" "No," I said. "I admit it was honest." Even the court reporter paused her typing. Atlas's lawyer took over. "Ms. Kovacs," he asked, "did you receive any compensation or incentive from Atlas before accepting their offer?" "No." "Did you coordinate with Atlas to time your departure?" "No." "Did you in any way alter or embed malicious logic prior to leaving Clark Systems?" I shook my head. "No." He nodded once. "Nothing further." Richard finally spoke. "Mila," he said quietly, voice breaking protocol, "why didn't you stop it?" I turned to him. "I tried," I said. "You told me to trust leadership." We locked eyes. "You trusted blood," I added. "I trusted math." The deposition ended shortly after. No raised voices, no theatrics. Just a room full of people realizing the story they'd told themselves would not survive daylight. Outside, rain tapped softly against the pavement. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done." I nodded, though it didn't feel like relief. It felt like gravity reasserting itself. My phone buzzed. A message from Nina. "Legal cleared it. No claims against you. None." Evan skipped town. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Across the street, Richard stood alone under the awning, making a call that clearly wasn't going well. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not powerless, just finally measured. As I walked toward my car, a strange calm settled over me. Not triumph. Closure. Because the truth doesn't need revenge. It just needs time. The weeks after the deposition were strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a city feels after a blackout. when the generators haven't kicked in yet and everyone is standing still, listening to what the silence might mean. Clark Systems didn't announce bankruptcy right away. Companies rarely do. They issue strategic pauses, restructuring plans, language meant to buy time while gravity finishes its work. But the servers never came back online. Atlas, meanwhile, moved forward without ceremony. No press release, no victory lap, just a steady expansion of the system we were building, transaction by transaction, client by client. The engineers worked with focus, not fear. Meetings ended on time. Decisions were documented. No one needed theatrics to feel important. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by my office and leaned against the doorframe. "We've been approached," he said. "By who?" I asked without looking up from my screen. "The Clark liquidators." I stopped typing. "They want to sell us the remaining IP," he continued. "What's left of it?" I turned in my chair. "There is no remaining IP." Daniel smiled thinly. "That's what I told them." The truth was harsher. What Clark Systems had wasn't intellectual property anymore. It was sediment, half-understood modules, orphaned code paths, interfaces no one dared touch because they might break something else. They weren't selling a system. They were selling regret. I declined. 2 days later, the rumor mill picked up speed. Evan had resurfaced, briefly, as a consultant for a startup in Miami. 3 weeks after that, the company quietly scrubbed him from their website. I didn't check his profile. I didn't need to. On a Wednesday morning, Nina emailed me privately. Subject? "Thank you." No body text, just 2 words. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. She'd stayed. She'd tried to hold the center while everything spun apart. Some people mistake survival for victory. It isn't. But it counts. That afternoon, Daniel asked if I'd join him for a walk. We crossed the bridge between buildings, the city unfolding beneath us in layers, cranes, traffic, water, light. Seattle was unchanged. It always is. Companies rise and fall, but the city absorbs it quietly. "You know," Daniel said, "the board asked why we didn't try to save Clark." I smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" "That it wasn't ours to save." I thought about that. "People think systems fail suddenly," I said. "They don't. They fail gradually, and then all at once." He nodded. "They also asked about you," he added. "What about me?" "What kept you there for 7 years?" I stopped walking. "Hope," I said. Not blind hope. Invested hope. I believed if I built something strong enough, the people above it would grow into responsibility. And I learned the difference between leadership and inheritance. We stood there for a moment, watching boats cut clean lines through the water. That night, I stayed late, tuning the final parameters of our redundancy layer. The system hummed softly. Not audibly, but in the way stable systems feel. Predictable, honest. No alarms, no clever hacks. Just work that did what it promised. My phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Mila," a voice said carefully. "It's Richard." I closed my eyes. "I won't take long." He added quickly. "I just needed to say something." I didn't speak. "The board forced my resignation," he said. "Effective tomorrow." I let the silence stretch. "I thought building the company meant securing it," he continued. "What I actually did was hollow it out." I could hear the acceptance settling in his voice, the kind that arrives only after denial is exhausted. "You were right," he said finally, "about the system, about Evan, about me." I waited, not out of cruelty, but because some realizations need space to land. "I hope," he added quietly, "that one day you'll think of Clark Systems as a place where something good once existed." I thought of late nights with engineers who cared, of code reviews done properly, of mornings when the platform ran clean and the world barely noticed. "There were good people," I said. "That matters." We hung up shortly after. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. The next morning, Atlas went live with our first external client, a mid-sized clearing firm that had walked away from Clark 2 days after the freeze. No announcement. No applause. The system absorbed the load effortlessly. As I watched the transactions settle in real time, one thought returned, uninvited but necessary. You don't win by destroying what already exists. You win by knowing when to step away and build something that won't need defending. And somewhere, deep inside the city's digital circuits, the last traces of Clark Systems quietly powered down for good. The email arrived 6 months later, quietly, without urgency. Subject: Final notice. Asset disposition complete. I opened it while waiting for a build to finish compiling. A bland message from a liquidation firm confirming that Clark Systems no longer existed in any meaningful legal form. Server racks sold. Furniture auctioned. Domain name reclaimed by a registrar to be parked and forgotten. A company dissolved so thoroughly it felt unreal. I closed the message and returned my attention to the screen. Atlas had grown. Not explosively, not recklessly, deliberately. The transaction engine sat at the heart of 3 financial networks now, moving money so reliably that most users had stopped thinking about it entirely. That's when you know you've done your job right. Daniel knocked lightly on my office door. 5 minutes? He asked. Always. We walked to the observation deck overlooking the city. Cloud cover hugged the skyline, the way it always did when Seattle wasn't sure what kind of day it wanted to be. We finalized the internal review today, Daniel said. Board approved your promotion. I raised an eyebrow. Already? He smiled. You already were the authority. This just aligned the org chart. I nodded, unsurprised. Lead platform architect, he continued. Full autonomy. And one more thing. He handed me a printed memo. The board wanted a principal statement, he said. Something to embed into engineering governance. I scanned the page. No system shall depend on unowned knowledge. No authority shall outrank understanding. Compliance is not obstruction. It is design. I handed it back. That'll cost you. Daniel laughed. Worth it. That same afternoon, I received another message. This one from a junior engineer at Atlas I barely knew. Hey Mila, sorry if this is weird. I heard what happened at Clark. Just wanted to say, watching how you handled it taught me more than any boot camp ever did. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Thank you. Build things that don't need you to defend them. Some lessons travel quietly. On my way home that evening, I passed the old Clark Systems building. The logo was gone. The glass reflected nothing but streetlights and rain. For the first time, I slowed down and parked. The lobby was dark. A for lease sign leaned against the inside of the glass. Offices above were hollow silhouettes, grids of absence where ambition had once lived. I sat there, engine idling, and thought about the version of myself who'd walked out of that building months ago with her laptop and a calm she hadn't yet earned. I hadn't won because I was right. I'd survived because I understood when to stop proving it. At Atlas, the work continued. Systems scaled. Clients added. Audits passed without spectacle. No emergencies, no heroes. One morning, Daniel forwarded me an article. Former CEO Richard Clark reached settlement with regulators. No jail time. Lifetime ban from serving as an executive officer. The headline framed it as tragedy. I didn't read it. People wanted villains and redemption arcs. What they rarely wanted was accountability that didn't come with fireworks. Later that week, a calendar reminder popped up. System stress test. Double load. I watched silently as the metrics rose. Throughput climbed. Latency held. Error rates stayed flat. The system breathed. Looks boring, one engineer joked. Good, I said. Boring means stable. When the test finished, no one cheered. They just documented results and moved on. That evening, I left the office at a reasonable hour. The rain had stopped. The streets reflected city light like clean code paths, orderly, readable, forgiving. At a stoplight, my phone buzzed. LinkedIn notification. Evan Clark viewed your profile. I stared at it briefly, then locked my phone and slid it into my bag.